Iburu, Iboya, Ibucheche, everybody in Cyberland. Hey, it's your favorite Babalao. At least I hope so. Omodum, Odileke, coming at you at exactly 05:30 in the morning, Central Standard Time. Because I feel like, man, haven't done a video lately. Been jobbing it really hard when it comes to just life in general, right? But hey, it's a fair Babalao. At least I hope so. Omodum, Odileke, coming at you with this great video. In this video, I wanted to kind of focus on kind of getting back to some of the basics, right? There's tons of videos that are still pending out there, tons of videos that I'm still working on, things that I always just want to make sure that nonetheless, I'm constantly communicating the great message of what is Ifa, what is Ocha, what is Eggun. And I think the premise, right, of this particular video is to just remind people, right, that when we talk about Ocha, when we talk about Eguns, when we talk about Ifa, right, these are not separate traditions, right? They're unified systems, no different than the sun, the moon, the stars that are guiding, right? The same sky, the same universe, right? And under that universe, right, you capture other elements. And I think that's why it's important for us to kind of understand, what are these elements of Ocha, Ifa, and Egu. So, without true, delay, because I know it's super early in the morning, people are probably trying to get to work. I wanted to make sure that we talk about this because I wanted to explore certain elements, right, of this particular life, right? I wanted to make sure that we understood, um, where we're going with this live and the why, because I think that's very important for understand. So let's go over just a little bit, right? A lot of times people say, well, Ifa is Ifa, Ocha is Ocha, Eguns are Eguns, right? So I wanna kind of make sure that we understand what that means. So I look at Ocha, Ifa, and Egun kind of like three different pillars, right? All under the concept of Olodumare being God and God being what shares that thought process, right? That creator that has an intent, a design, right? And this is not gonna be one of your, videos where we're gonna go over in detail the concepts of every single pillar because that would take hours, maybe even days to really truly break down. But understanding a system of life, right, not a religion, that is the key, right? And that is where we need to truly understand where we're going and how we're gonna get there. So I want to talk to you about a couple of things, right? And when I start to say these couple of things, I want to make sure that we are all tracking where I'm going with this, right? It's because a lot of times people go through ceremonies and they're not 100% sure in which house they're living in, right? And I always like to kind of bring the expression of imagine that you are living in the United States of America and you're going to go vacation in Europe. You're going to go take pictures. You're going to have time with friends and family. And with that, you're going to go and you're going to take your passport. Bam. Right? You get it stamped because you're visiting that country. Right? And then it's no different than, if you jump to another country afterwards, because let's just say you're trying to hit a couple of continents on the way out before you get back home. That is typically what you need to think of when you think about Ifa, Ocha, and Egu. Now, a lot of times it's very easy to understand that Ifa is kind of like an umbrella. And under that umbrella, there's different subsections of that umbrella. But I think it's a little bit more complicated than that, a little bit more complex than that. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of times people don't understand that Ifa is a universal concept of understanding from the concept of the Elereping, which is Orumila, right? And God, and what was the intent of, you know, what was created, what was morphed, right? So Ifa is, I guess, in my very first statement here, I want to make sure that we understand something. Ifa, at the end of the day, is the concept of understanding the words that Orumila is trying to instill into the universe, into the world, into humans, right? And allowing us to better understand where destiny is going through his wisdom and through his ability to be the witness of creation. That's who Orumila is. That's what Ifa truly is. When you go to a Babalao, okay, the first thing I want you to understand is that you are going with the intent for guidance. You are going with the intent of understanding, where am I going? How am I going to get there? And what is the best advice for me, Orumila, based on the fact that you were witness to creation? You understand the destiny of everyone. And understanding that concept alone, you now understand where Ifa's pivotal role comes into your life. And then when we start talking about Ocha, right, and we start to kind of see, where does Ocha lead us, right? We understand that Ocha is now a terrestrial type concept that begins to lead us in a different direction, right? We're still under the same premise of, what does Olodumare need from us? What does Olodumare require from us, right? But we understand that the house of Ocha, right, is now focused on the elemental energies themselves. And whether that energy started, right, in the home of Olodumare, or lives in the terrestrial world, which is the how we refer to them when they descended down as Orisha, is very pivotal to understand. And you begin to kind of see the differentials of the two. Because Ifa has to learn it all. Ifa has to be super structured in the overall concepts of all. This is why you see a lot of times where Ifa tells you to go to Ocha. Ifa tells you need to go, align yourself with the Eguns, which we'll talk about a little bit further as well. But when we see that, one of the very first things that we need to understand, right, is that Ocha itself is designed for another concept. Ocha was designed for us to harness the energy of nature, harness the energy of where we're going and how we're going to get there, but not in the concepts of Ifa, because Ifa was talking about how Ori descended from God down to this earth. Where is our head taking us, right? And understanding the full complexity, that full compass, that full map. That's Ifa. The Ocha side of the house now talks about that companion that came down with Ori. All right. Now, Ocha is going to tell us, how do we help defend that Ori? How do we help get some of those blockages from Ori? Right. And this is how Ifa, you begin to kind of see they have to work and they have to collude together. And that's something that's very, very, very important. Hey, Bodo Boy Bucheche Diaz, it's always good to see you. Always a pleasure, my friend. Good morning to you. And good morning to the viewers that are on right now. Because there's a few of you, and trust me, that was the expectation. I wasn't trying to get a whole bunch of people on here, but as you guys all know, if you have any comments, any questions, concerns, put them in the chat, and I get after it. So we kind of have a general elementary type understanding when we talk about Ifa and we talk about Ocha. Now let's further explain when it comes to Ocha. Every human, right, that came down to this earth, we understand that their Ori, their subconscious mind, that spirit, that light, that Emi, that breath of God that animates this body, right? That's Ori. And Ori has to come down with companions, has to come down with certain elemental energies universally, which now you begin to kind of see that Ori becomes the central point. And within Ifa, we begin to understand the concepts of Eshu, the messenger, Eshu, the evolutionary, we start talking about, the Orisha that is gonna accompany that Ori. We begin to kind of see where those strengths, those weaknesses start to align themselves, right? And then we also have to understand another concept, which is called Elenini. And Elenini is the obstacles. Elenini, to a certain point, can be described as negativity, but we understand that that might be a very rudimentary type explanation of Elenini, but think about something that's going to always create that obstacle for you, right? And it may be an obstacle that provides good, it could be an obstacle that provides bad, right? And understanding how these partners come down, which can be multiple, right? Which can be multiple Orishas, which can be multiple different entities that is required to come down, which is why we start to kind of say Ocha is very important. Ocha, we need to understand, right? So then again, we start to see the relationship between Ifa and Ocha, even when the basic concepts of, hey, you're going to receive your hand of Ifa. Who is your guardian Orisha? Hey, who exactly is guiding you? Hey, what are those taboos in your hand of Ifa that they tell you about? Don't eat eggs, don't eat coconuts, don't do this, don't do that. And you start to kind of hear these concepts, which sometimes a lot of people, try to better understand the why behind it, and rightfully so. Understanding the why is always going to be very, very, very important because, how else we were going to get there? Now, we understand Ifa. Now we understand Ocha. Okay, now we understand that original descent down. Now I want to talk about the Eggun. Now, when we talk about the Egguns, we understand that we all came from somewhere. We all have a DNA that can trace itself back to the very first man, woman. We understand that when this world was created, Olodumare had plans for us. Right? And every one of those Oris that descend down, that went to the foot of God to be released into this world, right? We understand that they had a purpose, right? But now those Eguns that live in Orun, in the ancestral plane, are now going to attach ourselves. So now let me explain Egun and then tell you how they collude together. A lot of times people take Eguns and they try to better understand Egun from the lens of biologically. Your Eguns don't necessarily have to be biological. Your Eguns can be different spirits, right? That came down, right? Or when during your descent, realize that your mission aligns very well with some of the things that they had to accomplish, some of the things that they still need to do in order to fulfill their own destiny. And that's when you begin to kind of see the concepts of other spirits that come into your cuadro espiritual or your spiritual framework. And you try to figure out, like, well, wait a minute, that's not an ancestor of mine. Because to think about Eguns as just an ancestral connection with someone who has shared your blood, your name, or something like that, that is, again, very rudimentary, very, very simple when it's a little bit more complex than that. So then we have to look at these eguns and that capacity as well. Some spirits, right? And we have to define it, spirits that come together, right? To be able to guide the person through in order to ensure that they get to where they got to get to. But no different than the concepts of Elenini, we look at the eguns in many different facets. We look at the egun, again, as another place that we travel through, right, in order to get to where we're trying to get back to. Okay. We look at them with different needs. We look at them as different compartments that can still be affected through this entity that we call Elenini, obstacles, right, that are put in front of us. This is another reason why a lot of times in the Eggun side of the house, we talk about certain concepts like what is a parallo? When do we have to exercise an Eggun buruku that needs to be removed from our spiritual framework, right? And that is going to be another concept that we have to better understand in the land of Eggun. So then I ask you, I said, well, what do you not understand? That if Ifa is an over-compassing system, and under that system, there's a trifecta of Orishas, Egguns, and now this third part, right? I need to be maybe better understood because as a Babalao, I am not Ifa, right? And what I interpret, right, Ifa to be is something different than saying I am Ifa. That third pillar is actually the disciples of Orumila. Those are the Babalaos, right? So it's really Orumila that we're focused and narrowed in on, not necessarily Ifa. And that misconception always seems to creep its head up. And I want to make sure that that is 100% clear. I am not Ifa, right? My abilities as a human being to interpret Ifa really comes through the idea of I am a priest of Orumila. I have crossed the thread, right, between the human life, the afterlife, the elemental energies in order to better understand where my priesthood lies and where it aligns through, which is Orumila. That is the concepts of this trifecta. This is the reason why it's very important for us to always understand something, which brings me to my next point. When we start to kind of see the Orishas, I had an interesting conversation with someone recently, right? And I tried to better understand, because we look at things so elementary as at a certain point that we have to be able to kind of better understand some things. When I look at Orishas, okay, when I look at Orishas, I don't see, oh, well, it's the oceans, Yemaya that I'm talking to. Oh, it's electricity, lightning, thunder, justice. When I talk to Chango, oh, it's Ochung, so therefore I'm speaking to the river. No, no, no. It's more complicated than that. Nature, Ocha, is a system of energy that's terrestrially bound to this world in order to assist and push forward in different realms of a certain individual's life and allow them to advance. That is Ocha. That is the full basic understanding of Ocha. Ifa. Okay, I go see a Babalao who's a priest of Orumila in order to interpret what does Ifa say to me so I can better understand where my Ori is trying to guide me so that I don't second guess myself because I'm trying to meet my destiny. Okay, very elementary, but just getting the icing of the cake. The Eguns. Who are my Eguns? Why my Eguns? Why are they here? Because our Eguns, no different than us, are trying to find their way to fulfill maybe obligations that they have with us. Maybe we resonate a certain energy or path that resonates with them and they want to help us through, right? It can be ancestral because what they couldn't give us in life, they want to give us in death, right? And we start to kind of see these very basic elementary forms, right, of these pillars, and we start trying to stop looking at things from a very 3D perspective, right? I don't want you to look at the Orishas as humans. I want you to look at these Orishas as the energies that control this world. I want you to look at the concepts of Ifa as guidance, moral compasses, GPS, in order to take us where we need to go. I want you to look at the Eguns as assistance from the other side, the ancestral plane, and this is where we need to go. they're in the Odum of Obewali, right? Or Obeowani, right? There's an old saying, an old quote, right? If you don't understand where you came from, if you don't understand where you come from, right, you'll never learn where you are going. And this is why I think it's important for us to understand this, right? No one can fulfill their destiny without honoring and understanding their origins. And remember, your origins come in many different facets. It comes from those three pillars. Understanding Ori is going to be part of the job of Ifa to interpret for you. Where is your destiny? The Ayamo, the destiny, Ori, the subconscious, the spiritual entity that lives in you. And let me tell you this, if that Ori is not happy, if that Ori is depressed, if that Ori is dirty, if that Ori is not shooting on all cylinders, right? There is no Ebo in this world that can help you. This is the reason why Ifa becomes very important to understand and interpreted by the disciples of Orumila, right? Now, same concepts with the Eguns. We don't necessarily need to dig any more deeper than that for the moment, but you understand that the Eguns are now another pack. And when you start to bring all these things together, you start to see, man, I got a little gang, I got a little army. You should feel good about that. And that is the basic understanding of this trifecta, right? So in Ifa, memory is sacred, right? It's the bridge between the past and the future. Right? Ocha, Ifa, and Egun are not separate paths. Right? And it kills me because I think I see and I hear more people trying to separate the three and break the three off, right? Not understanding that the Ifa is the over-compassing and that, there's always going to be the need for the disciples of Orumila. There's always going to be the Eguns. There's always going to be a need in Ocha. This is the reason why in Ifa, we tell people, go see the Eguns, go get scratched, go get your spiritual misa, start to define your spiritual framework. Hey, start to honor those Eguns, whether it's male, whether it's female, or hey, you have an Egun buruku, something that's dark that needs to get pulled out or needs to be cleansed from your path. And you start to see these deep conversations on Eguns. Hey, you have an Indian Egun that descended from certain lands, and you need to always honor that. Hey, take a glass of water with a candle, light it, and speak to your Eguns, your ancestors, but to particularly focus on maybe an Asian descent, an Egun Fileni, right? And you start to kind of see, man, well, why is he trying to get into a spiritual misa? It's not that Ifa is trying to get into a spiritual misa, is that as we interpret your Ori, as we interpret your compass, as we begin to cleanse you in order to align you, we see these images, we see these concepts of eguns that need to be attended. And that is all based on the goal of alignment. And then in many aspects, we see where, Orumila or the Babalaos are going to say, hey, go to Ocha. You need to maybe receive something from Ocha. Maybe it's a consecration. Maybe it's understanding the very, mere concepts of the advice that needs to be given to you by your Orisha. And when you start to kind of really see where this conversation is going, you start to kind of see the importance of all three realms. Right? And that's the reason why it's going to be super important for us to understand them. Okay. So here's the thing. When we look at Ocha, when we look at Ifa, when we look at the Eguns, right? We don't look at them separately, but we look at them as they're conjoined. Right? Even within the disciples of Orumila, we tell people that they need to align, let's say, with Palo Moyumbe. Maybe they need to go get scratched. Maybe they need to work on their spirituality. Maybe they need to work on that connection. Right? Even Ifa has, many people don't understand this, but even Ifa has prendas. Even Ifa has spiritual pots, right? Guided and geared by Ifa, right, for the needs of ensuring that there is a streamlined process of understanding and a way out and a resolution to your problems. And that is something that needs to be understood, right? We are joined to the hip to a certain point, and we can travel to each other's land for the intent of understanding Ifa, understanding the word of God and where does God want us to go. And that's something that we just have to do and we have to get better at, right? The sun, the moon, and the stars, right? Inside the spiritual sky, these are three lights with distinct functions, right? Yet they're born, right, from the same eternal truth which was given by God. And that's how you need to better understand it. So I'm hoping, right, that with this video, I gave you just another understanding of what those three things look like, right? A system of life, not a religion, is the next concept that I really want to make sure that I hit home, right? Our system has never been handed down to us, right, in a quiet gift. If you notice that the transgressions and the issues of how this faith grew through time, right, gives you a couple of things to understand. And I don't want you to worry about too much about the oppression. I don't want you to worry too much about what happened, but I want you to understand uh, a divination system, you know, which, Orumila has the divine tools for us to interpret Ifa. But these tools, this binary system that we call Ifa, the DNA of the universe, has been around for thousands and thousands of years before, BCE, right? So when we talk about that concept, we're not talking about something that, just fell from the sky, something that's new, something that's modern. I want you to understand that this system, this way of life, right, has always been here. From the primordial times of the creation of the universe to the creation of this world called Aye, to the aspects of understanding how this world came to be and populated, Ifa has always been around because that was the DNA, right, of that creation, of it all coming together. So it was actually carved out, right? When you talk about the human aspects, when we talk about, okay, let's fast forward a little bit, and we see the journey of where the Ifa and its overarching concepts start to kind of migrate itself, right? Through places like Egypt, places like the Middle East, when all the continents were together, right? When we talk about in many of the Oduns, right, where Orumila, meets Odudua, right? Very much east of current day Nigeria. We talk about those journeys, right? And we talk about where Orumila, when he first came as Iremole to Orisha to manifest in this world, begins to, understand the secrets of the rocks and the medicine and starts to find that holistic living, right? Not through different types of, aggressions or assaults. No, but begins to lead people in a certain way. And because of his leadership and because of where he was doing it at, he began to confront a lot of resistance of other movements, which began to, I guess, cause a lot of, rift between other religious cults or religious, sectors or other people with their belief systems. Because here's the truth of the matter. Religion itself is something that's designed to control people, right? Religion itself, right? And this is the reason why we don't necessarily call the concepts of Ifa, everything that lives underneath it, Ocha, Ifa, Egun, worship. It's not really a religion because we don't necessarily have guardrails, right? We don't have 10 commandments. We don't have a Quran. We don't have things that tell us that if you behave like this, then you get to these pearly gates. If you behave like this, good things happen. If you behave like this, you're an infidel. Or if you behave like this, you're going to go to the scary place called hell. And you begin to control people through fear, oppression, and you begin to have them understand that storybook, right? That they want you to understand. And it's very easy to control through the methods of fear. And I'm not saying this to downgrade any type of um religion. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that Ifa is not that. Ocha is not that. Eguns are not that. Right? But humans created these systems that begin to now automatically navigate humankind and civilization in a certain way. So obviously, when you talk about someone like Orumila, who now brings together a system that just says, hey, be a good person. Hey, stop trying to be like everybody else and understand that you have your own destiny. Be moral, be ethic. Here are some things you can do. Here's some holistic medicine that the very earth is providing you. Here are some ways to honor these energies that are around us, right? Called Orishas, so they can help push you forward in protection and love and prosperity and stability and health. And hey, don't forget about this internal thing called Ori, so it can help guide you and start listening to those spirits around you because this is how they're going to maneuver you. Obviously, that gives too much independence to the person. That makes people independent to the point where they don't necessarily need these constraints of a religion. And that's a very scary concept for people when they're trying to control, when they're trying to maybe sit on a throne as a king and lead. Right? And a lot of people, they need that in their lives. There is 100% need, I believe, in my mind, for certain people to need some guardrails and give them a book to allow them and guide them, understanding whether it's Ten Commandments, Quran, it doesn't matter, right? Whether it's they need that in order to feel fulfilled. They need that because it's very simplistic. They need that because independence is hard. Right? So don't take this the wrong way. I'm not talking about religion. I'm merely talking to you what Ifa, Ocha, Orumila, Eguns are not in a particular person's life. Little boy Abucheche, Blackish, how you doing? It's hard to break my background in Christian, right? The concepts of God, the Orisha puzzle me. I want to grow in Ifa. Freedom, free thinker. No, Bella Black. Let me explain something in that concept before I keep going on through my through my long-winded thesis, my lecture. Like some people like to say, like, hey, you lecture like a professor. But here's the concepts, right? Here's the concepts from the old books, right? Here's the concepts nonetheless. I can take every religion across the world, right? And I would tell you that probably, you know, they all have the same, I think, root system, right? They all come from the same roots. They want people to be better, right? They want people to follow God. They want people to be ethical. They want people to be part of community, right? And in the mission of doing that, they fall into the same trap that Obatala fell into. The Orisha of peace, harmony, the white cloth, right? Obatala. When Obatala came down in the path of Ayaguna, he didn't come down, you know, in those tenses or those characteristics of peace, harmony, etc. He did and he didn't, we'll say. He came down understanding that humans and to bring world peace, right? There had to be war. And through time, he felt that through war, I will bring peace to the world. I will get rid of all these warlords and get rid of all these, aggressors. And what Obatala learned very simply was that war was not necessarily the answer, but his natural instincts to maneuver this world was no different than a king, no different than a pope, no different than an Aman, no different than any type of world religion thought process. How do I best corral people in to understand that God's will is that you have to do these things, and but these things, right, have to be structured, and that's where these religions were based on. And as time defines itself and culture and tradition build, now we start to kind of see the building blocks of these religions, where in Ocha, Oromila, Egun worship under the umbrella of Ifa, understanding what God's intentions are, it was actually that people are individuals. But that is very hard to manage. Right? Very hard to manage. That's like almost saying you are the owner of a business, right? And in that business, there's the bottom line. In a business, you are trying to make money. That is the bottom line, right? That's the truth. But in that business, you have a business model. And in that business model, you have different department heads that need to accomplish certain functions because maybe you are a service provider. Maybe you are a product seller, right? And you have to make sure that everybody's building these same products. So you have all these workers all doing the same thing in order to get to that bottom line. That's running a company, right? That's running some form of hierarchy, right? From a CEO to a CFO to a COO, right? Just it's just a business model. And if you look at religion, it kind of has to do that because it's trying to get to that bottom line. It is their way of trying to understand life, humans, bring it together ethically, morally, right? And legally, right? For the greater good. But then it begins to inflate itself. And you begin to try to gear in a mechanism, certain things in that business model, right? In order to control, in order to, the very essence of control, one of the strongest components is fear, right? And that independence, right? That concept that you said there, a free thinker, right, is the very premise of why this spirituality, this system of spirituality, this system of a faith that can drive you as an independent person, understanding that there's no cookie cutter. There's no cookie cutter, right? You are you, and we need to make the best version of you. And if I had to consult the next person, I have to look at you as you, right? Not based on anything else other than what is your Ori telling me, right? And your Ori comes from your gender, your age, your guardian Orisha, your destiny sign, right? What is that current consultation telling me with the different signs? What is that prophecy going? So they can give you a snapshot in time to say, okay, here's where you are going. It's not a magic book. I'm not going to read from the pages of a certain passage and then I'm going to tell you the same advice and then I'm going to tell the next person the same advice. Because the advice of a 2-year-old and the advice of a 40-year-old need to be different. The advice that I give an 18-year-old female and the advice that I give a maybe a 14-year-old male, or better yet, an 18-year-old male and female are going to have different advice. Let's just be real. Let's look at it. Let's think about it statistically. Right? So, no, great question. Great question. So now let's go dig a little further. Let's just dig a little further. Let's dig a little further. I want to talk about our system and why our system's not a religion, right? Because now we understand Oromila. We understand that Oromila started to make his way west at a certain point, lands into this land that today in Africa we know as Nigeria. And we start to kind of see that Odudua, we understand that Oromila and Oduduwa met at a certain point. Oduduwa already made his way. Oduduwa already kind of staked his claim on Ile Ife, a place in Nigeria, right? The kingdom of oil, right? And then Oromila starts to kind of migrate west as well, right? And then he finds himself, right, in this kingdom of Oduduwa. Understanding who's Oduduwa, Oromila was like, okay, hey, you got a kingdom, you're a good friend. Hey, you know what? Let me plant myself here. And by as time kind of went by, Oduduwa, as the king of Oyo or Ile Ife at the time, Ifa started to spread wings, right? The control of the people started to shift. the understanding of the concepts of ethics, morals, and conduct was something that needed to happen. Oduduwa recognizing this as the great Orisha that he is, at that point now invokes Orumila, right? Ifa didn't come to this world planning, itself as supreme. This is another reason why Ifa is not a religion. No, it's something, a system that worked, and wise leaders adopted some of these systems. And then at that point, Odudua now brings in Orumila and says, "Hey, I need you to be my spiritual advisor. This is what right looks like. And this is how we lead people into evolution, into the vision of what God needs, right?" And they take this system, this art, right, that has a lot of science, and now they produce a product. But through time, we understand that humans do what humans do, right? We understand that, we get into a point of oppression, we get into a point of control, a point of power, right? The world constantly finds itself in this churn. I mean, you look at today's age, and we look at conflicts like Israel and Gaza, or Palestine and Israel. We look at Israel and Iran. You talk about the U.S., is constantly trying to see if they can barter deals to bring peace. But at the same time, the U.S. is still, has to do aggressive things. We look at the world economic stance. We look at Ukraine and Russia. We look at, earthquakes, and we look at just a volcano recently for the first time erupting out of hundreds of years. We look at very, weird things that go on around the world, and we say that man is always doing what man does, trying to control the narrative, control the peace through ways that they know, whether it's through war, through battles, or whatnot. And the plains of, Africa, right? In today's modern day Nigeria fell through the same thing. Our faith was carved out of resistance, was carved out of oppression, right? And because of it, it flourished under the oppression, and it survived the adaptations of trying to convert people in order to control people. And that's something that we have to kind of really take a step back and think about it and say, wow, okay. So, like all living systems, right, it grew through cultural exchange, right? Yoruba, right? Fon, Congo, Garabali, Mandinka, all different elements of Africa and tribes, right? That saw some of this original teachings, that lived a lot of this original teachings, right? Each were enslaved lineages that were brought, right? That were brought in its own sacred sciences, part of this adaptation that we see today in the modern world. We start to see in the Americas, right? These emerged into one rich spiritual tapestry. I want you to think about a beautiful work of art, right? Because what really happened behind the scenes is that through tragedy, we actually strengthened, right, the concepts of Ifa, the concepts of the disciples of Orumila, the concepts of the Eguns and the spirits, and the Orishas. Because now, for the first time, and again, oppression's oppression, bad is bad, slavery is bad. And I just want to make sure I make that known. But nonetheless, through that oppression came something beautiful. And then when you start to kind of see where the street names of Santeria come in, we start to kind of see, where people are starting to put a negative connotation on voodoo, on the Haitian people. We start to kind of see where a lot of people don't necessarily, they fear this unknown because it didn't come in their book, right? That is now their religion. And these slave masters, right? These colonials, right, try to convert. And that's fine. They did it. They converted many. Right? Many fell to that sword, but many did not. And that's where the preservation came in. That's that spiritual tapestry that I tell you that we have in the West. We saw a massive migration in Cuba. We saw massive migrations in Brazil, which had a lot of this tapestry that I speak of. And from different tribes and different lineages, we started to see where the Catholic saints started to make their marks. Right? But the Catholic saints were not the goal. They were merely our protection. They were merely our illusion, right? That we needed to put in front of others so that we knew behind St. Barbara, there was Chango. Behind Our Lady of Regla was Yemaya. Behind Our Lady of Mercy was Obatala. Behind the Holy Child of Atocha was Elegua. And behind these Catholic, funerals and these masses for the dead were actually our Eggun ceremonies. Still feeding our ancestors, still communicating with the Orishas, still understanding our independence because we were trying to get that communication from both sides. Then we start to kind of see that sacrifice preserved life. And this is reason why we always got to remember our ancestors. We always got to remember where we came from. In the Odum over Yobe is where that term comes from. Sacrifice preserves life. The syncretism of things, right, was the bull that preserved the three pillars. Hear me again. The synchronization of our faith, of our beliefs, was the ebo, was the sacrifice that was needed in order for us to preserve those three pillars. The understanding of Orunmila and his disciples, understanding our ancestors and their communications, and understanding the Orishas and their communications under this concept of understanding, which is Ifa, which is the word of God that's truly trying to communicate itself. Now, hey, John Madison, Buruboya, peace and blessings to everyone. Thank you very much for that, and thank you for sharing that. So now, let's talk about some other things. So we understand that, the slave ships and these three pillars stood in harmony, right? We understand that, long before the slave ships, the three pillars stood in harmony, right? And then we started to understand that Orumila's wisdom, guiding leaders, healers, warriors was important. We understand that the Orishas, shaping character, community, relationships with nature, right? We understand Eguns, right? Ancestors honored, for protection, guidance, justice, right? And we spoke about this already, right? But we also need to understand certain concepts. In Yoruba, in the ancient teachings, right? Eguns were fed before Orishas. Orishas were saluted before divination began. The cycle was unbroken because it's very much understood, right, that is what's going to lead to success. Many of our Orishas, right, are deified humans, right? Not many, some are deified humans that met their mission and moved on. We understand that some of the celestial powers, the Iremoles, when they descended down into this world to manifest themselves here, had an expiration date and they had to go back up. Right? And we understand that the concept of death has been around since the very beginning. And we understand that understanding death is preserving life. And we understand those things, and which is why it's very important. And the concept of, the understanding of our faith, that's a process that always needs to be understood. Right? Which brings me to my next point. In the Odun of Iwuri Obara, this shows us where Orunmila was seeking, wisdom from Osain. Who's Osain? The Orisha of herbs. And as a reminder that the healing forces come not just from the heavens. We'll call it heavens for the sake and purposes, but we're gonna refer it to as Olorum, right? That the healing forces come not just from Olorum, but also from the earth, which is also known as Aye. And the ancestors who mastered its medicine, we have to learn, their secrets. And as we begin to understand that, we start to see where this synergy between this place right above, right, or Olorum, and Aye is bridged together tighter than anything else. The secrets to our success and our health and where we're going, right, is really truly bridged, right, through the spirituality, right, that can never be severed. Good morning, Janae. Good to see you out here. So then let's start to talk about this middle passage, right, of our spirituality, which is the survival and code, right? When our people were taken in chains, okay, Ocha, Ifá, Eggun travel with them. We talked about this, right? In memory, in the rhythm, in the quiet call to the ancestors, right? A lot of times people hid, Orisha shrines and kitchens and bedrooms. Bawalaos preserved the Odus in whisper, right? Elders disguised Egun offerings inside of Catholic altars, and memorial ceremonies, right? Keeping the line of the open communications, right? The syncretism, right, was important. The syncretism, was work behind them was pure, but it was merely the mask. Orishas fed, Ifá consulted, Eguns remembered. That very fundamental that I just said, Orisha fed, Ifá consulted, Eguns remembered, is pretty much the premise of this faith. It's pretty much the premise of these three pillars, which is why, a lot of times I wonder why today we complicate our system so much, right? The very basic aspects of everything that we do. These three are not separated. They live under one organism, let's just call it the creator. The Orishas keep the daily ache flowing in your life through offerings, through song, through moral living. Ifá diagnoses the imbalances, prescribes remedies, and aligns destiny through the Odu so that you're better able to flow that ache that the Orishas are gonna give you. The Eguns ground us, they protect us, they ensure that we never walk alone, but teach us the history, the secrets on how we better need to base ourselves. There's an Odu that's called Dura Obe, right? Or Dura Niku, where the beauty of the Babalao is wisdom, not just Ache. Wisdom comes from knowing the Orishas, interpreting Ifa, and listening to the Eguns. If you remove one of these pillars, the house is unstable. So then I ask you, based on everything that I said, do we not believe that these three pillars live in unison under this grand, beautiful thing, which is the Word of God, and Olodumare, the process of things that is deciphered through Ifá, through the disciples of Orumila? So then, shouldn't it all be in unison? So we need to stop the division. It's my next piece of this. Right? We need to stop fighting in the infighting. I think I see too often, more times than not, where I have Orishas, priests and priestesses, right, of the Orishas, fighting with the Bawalaos, or not recognizing one system or the other, thinking one side is more supreme, one of these pillars is stronger than the next, which drives division, which drives confusion. A Bawalao never has the right to tell you, one thing is better than the other. Because, like I said earlier, each individual is different. You cannot define what's better than the other holistically. It's impossible because the teachings of Ifa say that my Ori came down one certain way. And through that certain way, it gets deciphered through different concepts. And it walks with different concepts. My ancestors and my spirits will be different in the next. My Orishas will behave differently with me than they will with you. Ifa is going to have a different conversation with me than they will with you. This is not about separation. So we need to be very careful with that. And so there's an old Pataki about Rumila and the mosquito from the Odung of Yobe, right? And a mosquito came to Orumila for guidance, right? And it was unaware of the snake that was beneath the mat. Right? So as Orumila prepared food for the mosquito, right? He killed the snake. It was a hidden enemy that was sent to destroy something. But the mosquito's own greed, right, caused it to burst. So I want you guys just to hear this parable. Hear what I just said, right? What is the normal function of a mosquito? To suck blood, right? Not knowing that Orumila had killed the snake in order to preserve it and to help give light and guidance to this mosquito, because that's what the mosquito was looking for. But because of the greed of the mosquito, ends up sucking all this blood and then it dies, creating a forever cycle that the mosquito plays, right? And so the lesson there is wisdom, right, can defeat hidden dangers. But self-destruction, that comes from ignoring your own limits. And knowing our limits is us understanding these three pillars. Janae, I chair the division is doing more harm than good. Both systems should be working in harmony to help all practitioners grow into what their destiny is to be. You said it. You said it beautifully, Janae, and I appreciate you for even mentioning that. That is 100% factual. Now, Osang and the Orishas. I want to make sure that I hit a couple of points home before even I have to start getting ready to go to work. And I know like many of you are either preparing to go to work, many of you are actually probably in transit to work, but the Orishas tried to take Osang's herbs, right? Which are the secrets of the herbs, without learning the sacred words, right? So they failed. So we understand that there's a lesson to be learned about power without knowledge is nothing. This is the reason why we see that people early on were being poisoned. They were eating the wrong berries. They were eating the wrong leaves. They were trying to consume when they couldn't, right? And that is something that I want you guys to understand. That even in Orisha worship, we begin to kind of see where neglect can get you into issues. Power without knowledge is nothing, right? You know, I'll give you another lesson. In Irete Meiji, a family ignored their ancestors, and illness started to spread. And only after offering and promises at the graves, right, did peace return. Because the living cannot thrive while neglecting the dead, right? You know, there was an old slave that became a free man. That was a great Babalao, Romigio Herrera Adesina, enslaved, brought to Cuba, swallowed his tools of divination, right? For Ifa, to keep Orumila alive. Freed by his godfather, helped restore Ifa in Cuba. And that right there is what the sacrifice is all about. That right there is the reason why I make these videos. That right there is why it's important for us to spread the good word, right? That right there is crazy. Think about it. Our survival is not just myth, it's human courage and action. So, with that said, hey, today we face two great dangers, right? Commercialization of the faith. Titles are sold, ceremonies are rushed, knowledge is bypassed because it becomes a byproduct. People want to wear all the beautiful eleques and all the beautiful ideses, and they want to have all their orishas adorned beautifully. And they don't know the three simple pillars. They have yet to learn how to navigate those three simple pillars in their own personal life, but yet are trying to gain the title, right? The knowledge is bypassed to a point where, hey, do you understand where you're going? And I'm not saying don't run off and become a priest and priestess. If that is what your desire is, and it aligns with your hand of Ifa, your awofaka, or your Ikofafun, then great. You know what I mean? Then do it. Run after it. It's part of your destiny because now it's aligned, right? And it doesn't matter how fast you get there, as long as you continue to learn, understand the basics. Don't rush through things. Understand what you have. Once you master that, go get the other thing. You want to be a priest and priestesses, be the moral, ethical teacher, right? That does things, right? In the essence of God at the end of the day. Here's something a lot of people don't realize. Your transgressions as a human, right? People may not have been able to unmask you yet, but I'm going to tell you what you didn't hide from. You have not hidden from the Orishas. You have not hidden from the Eguns. You have not hidden from the sight that Orumila, has already given you when he interpreted the Oduns for you, telling you your left and your right bounds. At the end of the day, everyone does see, what you're doing. And I'd rather be good with my spiritual side than worry about what the physical side is seeing. I don't really worry about what humans can see. I worry more about what the spiritual side can see. The spiritual side is what's going to empower me. The spiritual side is what's going to guide me. That is what's going to create my path. Not the physical side. So always remember that. Don't disconnect from your roots, right? Take something from this. Practicing without understanding language, history, ancestral foundations, those are going to be, you know, tools of revival for you and your spirituality. You don't have to learn Yoruba tongue. You really don't, right? It'd be nice for you to understand Yoruba tongue because, as our spirituality came from one place to the next, right? We understand that one of those stomping grounds was, Nigeria, modern day Nigeria, right? But we got to understand that community is more important. Understanding the modern day translations of where Ifa is trying to guide us in 2025 and beyond, that's important. Understanding the basics of these three pillars, that's important. Building our family Eggun altars and making sure that we understand where are we going, that's important. Orisha festivals, returning to those deeper purposes of alignment. It's not just a performance. So don't do things for performance. We're not here to perform. You and I are not actors. Anybody who sees this needs to understand this. I am not trying to bring the grits and the glam, right, to a ceremony, but I'm going to do it right. I'm going to do it to connect. I'm going to do it from a place of heart that probably has more ache than those that are trying to glit and glam. Now, if you could incorporate the glit and the glam inside of your ceremony, beautiful. That's not the intent. In the Odung of Owani Bofun, Owani Ofun warns that no one can give what they don't have. If we don't reconnect with the three pillars, we can't pass them on to the next generation in truth. So then I ask, when we're involved in this faith as priests, priestesses, aleyos, non-initiates, just curious, jumped on this YouTube to hear this crazy guy speak. You know what I mean? Um, hey, I can't give you something that I don't understand. And I mean, it goes deeper than that. Hey, why do you blow rum? Why do you blow gin on the Orishas? Hey, why do you use this thing called palm oil? Hey, why is it that there's different forms of a judía, which is a rodent in Cuba, that is different in Nigeria, that is different in the Middle East, and that is different in Europe? Because the symbolism of that animal is what I'm trying to get after. That energy that I'm trying to get after that animal. What is that animal? A survivalist, right? It's been through transgressions, constantly hunted, constantly on the move, looks at things from different perspectives as it travels through day and night, right? It's a survivalist, right? Think about the power that that animal itself introduces into this world. That energy is what I care about. Think about that, just that one thing I just mentioned to you. And you begin to kind of see the characteristics of an animal. And this is why I use this animal. So I leave you guys with that today. Hey, 3 simple ways to honor your Ocha, your Ifa, right? Which is going to be what Orumila gave you, your hand of Ifa. If you're a Babalao, you have your 4 pillars even within your sopera, within your Igba Odu or Igba Orumila, right? And how do you honor your Eguns, right? Together, right? Don't forget to salute your Ori every day. Light a candle to your Eguns. Give them water. Greet the Orishas. Take some time away from this. Take some time away, whether it's a minute or two, to meditate and understand where's your life going. What's that conversation with your Ori, right? Making sure that we unify offerings, right? Making adi moves for the Orishas. Place a small portion to your eguns. Allow the Orishas into your life. Incorporate them into your life. Listen to all the voices. You're not crazy. Start to have that conversation with your Ori as you're going for a walk, right? When you're disconnecting. And you're talking to your Ori, and every day you're giving thanks to your Ori for the love, the prosperity, the stability. And even if you don't have it, you give thanks to your Ori. You keep it pure because guess what? Nothing is stronger than you, your Ori. Because your Ori is a byproduct of Olodumare, God Himself, the essence of God. So no Ebo is ever going to help you if your Ori is not right. So again, Ocha, Orumila, right? Which is interpreted through those disciples. Eguns are the breath, right? Of Olodumare in human life. They were born before slavery. They were tempered through slavery. They live today, right? For those who walk them fully and understand them fully, right? So with that said, let's bring ourselves together as a community. Let's make sure that we walk these 3 pillars, under the sun, the moon, the stars, right? Under the eternal world, right? Under this and under the words of God, nonetheless. So we're closing. May Olodumare keep your head cool. May your path stay cool. May your days be full of Ache. May the Orishas guard you. May the Eguns walk with you. And may Ifa always guide you. Ire bobo, bobo ire. Blessings in all things. And with that said, now it's time for me to hit the road, Jack, and never come back. No, I'll be back. Hey, Iburu, Iboya, Ibucheche, everybody at Cyberland. Sorry I haven't released videos lately. Been very focused on the course, making focus on teaching. That is my passion. That is what I love to do. So from my family to yours, your fair Bawala, at least I hope so. Omodo and Dile que. Don't forget to like, share. That'd be awesome. I don't see any questions on the chat. How do I find your classes? Bella Black. I will in the description portion, Bella Black. You can find or you can just email me and I can help guide you through that. But you will find a Botanica website, right? That's ran by my wife, and then I just happen to go ahead and put my stuff on there. But there's a good way to get that. If you are a member of this channel, always remember that I gave the first 4 sessions of um the lesson plan, right? Which is the first 4 weeks building on that foundation, that Ori, understanding, where we're going and how we're getting there. What is this Yoruba cosmology? I gave it to all my members for free, right? All my ILE members, they got it for free. They already know that. So there's perks to being a member because as I release these things, they become free. And actually, this Thursday, for those of you who are members, right, we have another class. This will be the final, right? The 4-4, right? In order to ensure that you guys are all getting some greatness, and you guys are getting the knowledge needed that I believe that we can share and build this community together, this world together. And with that said, hey, Iburu, Iboy, Abucheche, Ache, Ache, Ache. Look at that. All the Aches and blessings and love. Hey, may you guys have a great, great morning and enjoy your Tuesday.